the Tuesday, January 25th meeting of the St. Bernard Community Improvement Corporation meeting to order, please. If we could have a roll call by the secretary.
Jonathan Stuchel.
Present.
Tom Rolfson.
Present.
Bob Culbertson. Joe Brickler. Peggy Brickway. Ray Culbertson.
Here.
Chris Sauer.
Here.
Chris Schildmeyer.
Present.
Jerry Wiedemann. Amy Osmali.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes as presented?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second it.
Before we do that, I didn't have in my notes what the Fifth Third account balance was as of the December 2nd meeting. Is that something?
December 2nd,
Yeah.
425,667.97.
With that addition.
Okay, so now is, I guess we're good. And do we have a treasurer's report?
Yep, the bank account at Fifth Third currently has $381,000, $63.82. First State has $20,126.06. Major expenses was Hamilton County Treasurer, $56,000, and property taxes that were due by the 31st that we could have checked for. Insurance, property insurance, $9,196. And then we had Duke, Plattenberg for $1,015, and then stuff related to Skyline property, Long John's property. Let me back that up. $3,369. Those were the major expenses so far in January.
That was the final bill that we had from the
Title company. Yeah.
The file cleanup and we're done, right?
Correct. And then also, just on a side note, we are going through the year-end audit, so I believe everybody here will get a note in the mail that we get every year, just certifying. I think they ask like 6 or 7 questions, so just be on the lookout for that. I think Peggy usually passes them sometime February, March. And that concludes it.
Okay. Just a brief recap, because since we did not have our December meeting, of course, we did sign our LOI and the amendment that was approved with the Civitas Development Group. We're on our way to working towards the purchase agreement to be completed. And I was going to ask Taylor if she'd be willing to kind of just give us maybe a brief timeline on like next steps, just kind of for everyone to have a better understanding.
So, as you mentioned, it sounds like we're well on our way to working towards that purchase agreement. We're just going to have to make sure that everything is negotiated before we move forward with that. But a lot of that was set forth in the LOI, which we've already talked through in the amendment. So those were the major terms, and a lot of this is more of the kind of legal portions of the actual sale and transaction. As far as timeline, I know that Civitas has been working to interview various property management companies. They also have been figuring out exactly who they're going to be working with from a contracting perspective. They are working towards the financing portion of this as well. I can't remember if the market study was completed the last time that we all got together or not, but that has been completed and they've got what they need there. So ideally, as soon as they can get a meeting to talk about the financing, there's basically a pre-meeting that has to occur with 221D4 financing with HUD prior to, actually working towards closing and getting approval for that. So they are getting that scheduled now, and I anticipate that they should be here at the next meeting to give us further updates once the actual PSA is further along.
And if I could, just to remind the audience about the term HUD, again, we're still talking about market rate. This is just a financing option that they're utilizing that does actually finance market rate projects.
That is correct.
Mr. President, on the just the overall language, I don't know. Somebody was asking me if there's any language in this agreement that if for some reason it would go into potential Section 8 housing, since CIC is partial owner group in there, would we have the right to dispute that or push back on any potential, Section 8 or lower income housing in those units.
So they have to have a specific product type identified to even apply for this financing, and I can say that, that is not the product type that's been identified, and that's not what they're applying for. I think that our agreement, as it's laid out, designates what we've talked about this entire time, which is market rate housing. So there's no room for that in the current agreement, as I understand it.
As far as, I guess, the next steps, I don't know the next appearance that the development group might be making with the board itself, or when we would expect them to be back here in person. Is that something you think would be in the next couple months that we would see them again?
Absolutely. I think that they intend to be coming to meetings. They're not at this meeting because we're working through the PSA right now, so there's a lot of behind the scenes going on, but I believe that they are going to have representation at meetings going forward just to continue to update us as they move forward. And I know that I'm not sure what our procedure as a board is here, but whether it would be property review committee or even the entire board, but I think they want to make sure that we're having opportunities to ask questions, provide feedback as things become more firm and they're working towards, final financing on this. So whatever that looks like for the board, I think they're 100% open to, but they will be back in, I would say next month's meeting even to give us some updates.
Great, thank you. All of you have an updated copy with the corrected dates and timeline for the RFP for the Tower Avenue property development, as far as the RFP for that project. So, which basically lays everything out time-wise. We've stuck with what was approved at the previous meeting that we voted to build 4 additional units under 2 roof structures, as far as to similar architecture, so plans could be submitted. I know there were some questions regarding this plan, whether or not we would modify it to potentially not build, the total number of units that were originally anticipated, to potentially have some green space, but what we did vote on was to continue the project as originally anticipated. So we will be moving forward with that. I have cleared this with the building department, verified zoning-wise, and everything is in order. So if there was anything that would be forthcoming that would need to be approved based upon required setbacks, Mr. Stoker had reassured me that, of course, normal process would go forward, which, it could all be presented to the BZA if necessary, but I think we're in good shape. So that is going to be posted on the village website under the CIC section tomorrow. So that'll be made available for anyone to work through the process. There's a timeline again that's stipulated based upon any question and answer time period, and then the date in which the final proposals are required to be submitted. So we will review those plans. Normal course would be for it to go through property review committee and then would be brought forward to the board as a whole to vote on. So
I have a question. Single family. But the wording.
So I believe we discussed leaving that as is, and if that's one of the FAQs that we get, that will be answered in more detail in one of those rolling documents that answers those types of questions. But for clarification's sake, I think we had talked about, as long as it matches the aesthetic of what's already on that block, that's really what is being looked for here.
all right, as far as the license agreement that was presented to and voted and approved for the use of the Vine Street property that's being utilized by St. Clement. Of course, I don't see them utilizing it right now for recess, anything like that. but I have not heard back from them. I will be reaching out to the principal to verify where they are on that, because based upon, again, what our insurer is requiring, we do need to come to some type of agreement, of course, to protect ourselves for that. So I'll be moving forward with reaching out to the principal and seeing if we can't, come to some sort of clarification on that as to whether or not it can still be continued to be used. But again, that has been approved by the board. As far as the next steps, I wanted to discuss this, one of the proposals that we'd had before, of course, now that I think we're in a better position to move forward with seeking out, someone to guide us through the Vine Street Master Planning, would be putting out, I guess an RFQ as far as, or RFQ for a quote for that process. I'd like to kind of focus on that, hopefully within the next month or so. Maybe we could start putting together some drafts and reaching out to seeing what we might need to do to include that. But one of the questions being is that whether or not, if we're going to be doing that, whether or not, if what the cost would be for just the Vine Street focus, whether or not it would behoove us, because we are talking about our business district, that we do at the same time do a complete review of our zoning in the village, because it is rather confusing. And I do think that, with some of the things that are being proposed right now currently in the village, it would be a good idea to discuss that. So I don't know if there would be a possibility of maybe asking, what that cost would be to do a review at least of the zoning, so that we could have, a better comprehensive plan as to how we might be able to incorporate, additional businesses throughout the village, because it is rather confusing.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can easily start to get some pricing on and get a better understanding of. And just, speaking from my experience with other zoning codes, St. Bernard zoning code is rather antiquated, and we don't have any sort of digital map for folks to reference. So that could be a really positive addition. But I'm not sure if that's something that the CIC would handle, or is that something that the village would need to lead?
Well, the CIC had basically, so with that being said, the CIC had agreed to take on the Vine Street master planning. But if we're talking about, because we just had to make a modification to the Heritage Hill District to allow for the retail options and service-related businesses. So that was prohibited in the Heritage Hill District. So if we're going to be focusing on that, it might not be a bad idea to at least ask if there's anything else that we would need to review. And I don't know what kind of additional cost, but at least maybe potentially get a quote, and we could vote on whether or not that's something we would want to include if we would be able to retain, a firm. I do know there's several local, agencies that we could, try to reach out to.
Yeah, I think at a minimum, the assessment of the zoning code should happen with any planning process to make a recommendation that it is either, modified or whatever that might look like in the future. But I think that, for a master plan of the corridor, that almost has to occur because you're looking at it holistically. So definitely make sure that's included in what we're asking for as I start to draft some things up.
Perfect. As far as anything under open discussion, additional agenda items, I do have one thing before Tom goes. I did not have an opportunity to get the RFPs, or I guess prepared for our annual mowing contract. I will have that out next week and have that available. And this is the normal time of the year that we start putting that out and start, I guess, requesting those bids come in. And at this point, I'm guessing that we want to continue pursuing that route, because we have not reached back out with the intent of trying to look at the Port Authority to take over maintenance and management and overseeing of our properties. And I guess that's probably not going to happen for this time frame. We're probably going to miss the boat on that. But as of right now, managing what we have, I think, is still, reasonable. So I will get that ready and get that out. It's just going to be the same exact format, and then we can, vote on. We'll put the time frame out, and then we'll be able to vote on the actual candidates that submit the bid packages. Does anyone else on the board have anything under open discussion or additional agenda items? You're sure, Tom? Okay. Anyone in the audience have anything under open items that they might like to contribute? So our next meeting is scheduled for February 22nd here in council chambers. At this point, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second it.
All right, thank you.